Welcome to the CTR ALT Society podcast. Remember when Apple events truly felt like watching history unfold right before our very eyes? I'm talking about moments like the unveiling of the original iPhone back in 2007, or the revolutionary launch of the App Store that just completely redefined mobile computing, or even the debut of Face ID, which really changed how we interact with our devices. Each of those keynotes felt like a real thunderclap, signaling groundbreaking innovation that reshaped industries and, frankly, consumer expectations,
Absolutely. Those are big moments.
right? But fast forward to today, what do we typically get? A slightly shinier camera bump, maybe a few new color names, and perhaps a titanium frame that, let's be honest, shaves off what, 19 grams? It kind of leaves us with a compelling question for today's discussion. Has Apple truly lost its innovation edge, maybe prioritizing incremental changes, or are we, the audience, just simply impossible to impress now in what's become a remarkably mature tech landscape? I'll be making the case that Apple has indeed shifted its focus, moving away from those bold breakthroughs towards more of a strategy of iterative refinement.
And I come at it from a fundamentally different perspective. While I absolutely get that feeling, that nostalgia for those thunderclap moments, I'll argue that this perception of a lost edge is actually more a reflection of market maturity and, evolving consumer expectations than any genuine decline in Apple's capacity for innovation. The technological context today is just profoundly different from the sort of wild, open frontiers of 2007. And Apple's strategic evolution as, well, the world's most valuable company has to be viewed through that lens.
Okay, so my core perspective is that Apple's early iPhone magic era wasn't just about novelty, it was genuinely defined by these paradigm-shifting innovations. Take multi-touch. It wasn't just a new way to interact, it completely revolutionized how we understood and manipulated digital interfaces. The App Store. It didn't just distribute software, it created an entirely new economic ecosystem and fundamentally redefined mobile software. Siri brought sophisticated voice interaction into the mainstream, kind of changing our relationship with digital assistants. And Face ID moved beyond mere biometrics to offer this seamless, secure, and intuitive way to unlock and authorize. These weren't small steps, they were foundational shifts that fundamentally altered how we engage with technology. Now contrast that with today's iPhones, which are, by and large, characterized by mostly iterative changes. We see camera improvements, yes, but often subtle ones. Brighter screens that are objectively better, but not revolutionary. Minor chip performance bumps, new finishes, and while these are functional and welcome, they demonstrably lack that transformative impact. The iPhone 4 or the iPhone X, even Siri's intro with the 4S, they created genuine cultural shocks, right? Igniting widespread excitement and conversation. A new iPhone today, like the hypothetical iPhone 16, is perceived as maybe a little shinier, perhaps a little lighter, but the core experience remains largely unchanged. It feels kind of like going from albums that defined a generation to, I don't know, deluxe remixes with one extra track. Pleasant, sure, but not groundbreaking. My position is that Apple has clearly demonstrably shifted from revolutionary innovation to a strategy centered on refinement and incremental updates. And that fundamental difference is, I think, palpable to consumers.
Hmm. See, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that this signifies a loss of innovation. Let me elaborate on why I see it differently. This whole notion of lost innovation fundamentally misinterprets the current stage of technological development and, importantly, Apple's strategic evolution as arguably the most valuable company in the world. The reality is, those truly earth-shattering wow moments are inherently harder to come by, simply because core consumer tech has matured. A lot. We are, to some extent, spoiled by the past. The foundational breakthroughs that define the early smartphone era, things like a proper mobile internet browser or a really high-quality camera in your pocket, they've already been made and, frankly, perfected. The category is now incredibly refined. Furthermore, and this is crucial, Apple's business model has undeniably shifted in profound ways. They now derive significantly more profit from their burgeoning services division. Think Apple Arcade, Apple Fitness Plus, iCloud subscriptions.
Apple Music, and also from wearables like the Apple Watch and AirPods. And of course, the powerful lock-in of their integrated ecosystem. Much more than just from risky, capital-intensive hardware bets on their main product line.
Okay, that's fair. The services side is huge now.
Exactly. And this strategic pivot naturally leads to a focus on maximizing margins and ensuring predictability in their core hardware lines. Consider this analogy. Apple's approach now is kind of akin to a luxury car maker like Porsche. The 2025 Porsche 911 looks almost identical to the 2024 model, right? And in that market, that's precisely the point. Consistent, unparalleled quality, subtle yet significant engineering improvements under the hood, and maintaining an established premium experience, those are the forms of innovation valued most in such a mature, high-end market. So, my position is that Apple's current strategy is a rational, sophisticated response to market maturity and evolving business imperatives. It's not a sign of diminished innovative capacity. In fact, I'd argue it's a mark of their evolving strategic genius.
I see why you might frame it that way, especially, when considering the undeniable maturity of the smartphone market. However, I think there's a crucial distinction we need to make between inevitable maturity and deliberate strategic choices, particularly on the hardware side. If we look at the broader landscape, many of Apple's rivals are still taking truly bigger swings in hardware design and form factor. We see companies like Samsung and Huawei consistently experimenting with foldables, rollables, these kind of wild new concepts that fundamentally rethink the physical interaction with a mobile device. Now, while some of these might indeed be niche products today, they represent a willingness to push the boundaries of what a phone can be. In contrast, Apple, year after year, often remains seemingly stuck on the safe, familiar slab of glass. It's not simply about what's technologically possible anymore. It feels like a conscious strategic choice. The company's, well-documented business model shift towards services and cementing that ecosystem lock-in directly incentivizes a more cautious approach to core hardware. It prioritizes those reliable high margins and predictability over risky, potentially disruptive hardware bets that might alienate a massive user base or introduce unforeseen costs. This isn't just an inevitable outcome of market maturity, it feels like a deliberate strategic decision to play it safe. So my question to you is, if the innovation is still possible in hardware, why isn't Apple leading the charge with these bold new form factors that their rivals are exploring, even if those rivals don't achieve the same sales volume?
That's an interesting point regarding competitors' experimentation, and it's true they are exploring different avenues, though I would frame their impact a bit differently. While companies like Samsung and Huawei certainly offer these wild form factors, we have to scrutinize whether these are truly mainstream successes that fundamentally shift the market, or if they largely remain sort of fascinating, yet niche products for early adopters. Adoption rates for foldables, while growing, are still a tiny fraction of the overall smartphone market, right? Apple's consistent, iconic design and their relentless focus on polishing that safe slab of glass is precisely what allows them to sell hundreds of millions of units reliably year after year. That perceived safety, in my view, isn't a lack of innovation, but part of a sophisticated, proven luxury car maker strategy. In this paradigm, stability, uncompromising quality, and a deeply refined user experience are the innovation. They aren't chasing novelty for novelty's sake. They're perfecting an already highly successful and beloved formula that appeals to a vast global market. Owning the new iPhone, even with what appear to be minor changes on the surface, still serves as a powerful status flex for users, precisely because it represents the pinnacle of that perfected, reliable technology. This speaks to a different kind of value and innovation within a mature market, one that prioritizes consistency and refinement. Wouldn't you agree that maintaining such a dominant market position and delivering consistent, high-quality experiences to such a massive scale requires a sophisticated, ongoing form of innovation, even if it's less outwardly dramatic?
I'm not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning, particularly when the perceived lack of tangible wow in Apple's core products has become, almost a recurring cultural punchline. It's reached a point where Apple is seen as being like at a dinner party, perfectly dressed, quietly sipping its expensive wine, while everyone else around them is doing karaoke, taking bigger, more visible risks. We frequently see memes of spot the difference between last year's and this year's iPhone circulating widely across social media. This isn't just a niche observation from tech enthusiasts. It reflects a collective broad recognition that the visible, palpable wow factor has indeed diminished in their primary offerings. This perception that Apple has, in a sense, lost its innovative spark compared to its own transformative past, it feels very real and widely felt by consumers.
The status flex you mention only really works as long as the product still genuinely evokes a sense of advanced capability or desirability. When the differences between generations are so minimal that they become the subject of popular satire, that flex starts to wear thin, doesn't it? The wow factor that defined earlier iPhones wasn't just about sleekness. It was about what the phone could do that no other device could, fundamentally shifting expectations. My concern is that while refinement is valuable, it eventually hits diminishing returns in terms of public excitement and perceived innovation.
That's a compelling argument about the cultural perception, and yeah, the prevalence of those spot the difference memes is certainly undeniable. However, I believe the cultural lens through which we're viewing this might be misinterpreting the present. Maybe it's not Apple that's lost its magic. It's actually us, the consumers, who have become harder to impress. Tech across the entire industry has matured to such an advanced degree that truly revolutionary wow moments, the kind that happened in the nascent smartphone era, are inherently harder to come by for any company, not just Apple. Yet, consider this. Apple events are still like the Super Bowl, right? Millions of people tune in, even if they often claim to know the script. This sustained global engagement, this continued cultural fascination, strongly suggests that the wow has merely shifted. It now resides not in dramatic visual overhauls, but maybe in the seamless, almost invisible integration across the entire Apple ecosystem, in the subtle but profound performance enhancements that improve daily life, and in features that solve complex problems in less dramatic but equally impactful ways. The wow is now embedded in the holistic experience, the underlying sophistication, and the sheer reliability that, while maybe less memeable, is no less significant to the user. Don't you think that this continued massive engagement, despite the lack of thunderclap hardware changes, points to a deeper, more enduring form of innovation? One that is perhaps just harder to articulate in a single viral moment?
Okay, while I acknowledge your points on market maturity and the shift in what constitutes a wow for some, it does lead me to wonder if Apple chose to genuinely surprise us again, if they decided to activate that, let's say, dormant innovation edge, where exactly could they make a truly groundbreaking impact? It feels like the capacity for innovation isn't gone, but rather it's been deliberately put on hold for their flagship product. I believe we could see Apple making a truly groundbreaking impact with genuinely AI-powered iPhone features. And I mean deeper than just, advanced camera filters or basic voice commands. Imagine on-device AI that offers proactive assistance in truly intelligent ways, fundamentally changing how we use the phone for productivity, creativity, or even health monitoring, moving beyond reactive requests to, anticipatory intelligence. Or, of course, the mainstreaming of something like Apple glasses or a truly revolutionary AR headset that isn't just an accessory but a new computing platform. These are areas where Apple could deliver that thunderclap moment again, but we haven't seen that truly materialize within the core iPhone experience yet. And that reinforces the idea that the boldness has been paused in favor of a more cautious, iterative approach to their most profitable product line.
And I agree completely that those are certainly exciting avenues, and they are precisely where I see Apple is innovating, just perhaps not always in the traditional slab of glass form factor that dominates our current perception of their innovation. The Apple glasses or a mainstreamed AR/VR headset, building on the foundational technology we've seen in the Vision Pro, represents a potential next revolution that could indeed make us look back at the iPhone as almost training wheels for spatial computing and human-computer interaction. It's a massive, complex undertaking that requires foundational scientific and engineering breakthroughs, and Apple's methodical, long-term approach to this space is itself a form of innovation. Similarly, AI-powered iPhone features, which are already evolving beyond mere filters to enhance privacy, security, and computational photography in subtle but powerful ways, represent significant advancements. They may not grab headlines with a single wow feature, but their cumulative impact is profound. And moreover, we shouldn't overlook innovation in areas like sustainability. Apple's efforts in developing eco-materials, achieving carbon neutrality, and enhancing recyclability for their products are critical, forward-thinking forms of innovation that impact the planet, even if they're not flashy keynote moments. So I would strongly suggest that Apple's innovation isn't lost. It's simply shifting its focus and manifesting in different, often more profound and long-term ways, anticipating a future where the next major breakthrough may not be a phone at all, but an entirely new platform that redefines how we interact with the digital world.
Right. So to summarize my perspective then, while Apple undeniably continues to refine and polish its existing products to an incredibly high standard, the evidence consistently points to a strategic choice they've made. This choice prioritizes consistent profitability, optimizing their existing ecosystem, and delivering incremental updates over the bold, disruptive hardware innovations that once truly defined the company's magic and reshaped the tech landscape. The visceral wow factor, that sense of revolutionary change, feels largely absent from the core iPhone experience today, leading to a palpable feeling among many that something fundamentally different is happening now.
And I would just reaffirm that Apple's current trajectory is, in my view, a sophisticated, highly rational adaptation to a mature tech landscape and a diversified, immensely successful business model. The widespread perception of a lost innovation edge often stems from a longing for a past era of nascent technology that is simply no longer feasible given the advanced state of technology today. I firmly believe Apple's future innovations will manifest in less obvious, perhaps more integrated, but equally impactful ways, redefining what wow means in the context of a holistic ecosystem in new, emerging product categories like spatial computing.
The question of Apple's innovation, therefore, remains a rich and complex discussion, one deeply influenced by evolving business strategy, the inherent maturity of the market, and our own shifting cultural expectations for what constitutes a breakthrough.
Indeed, it truly leaves us to ponder whether the wow has genuinely vanished from Apple's repertoire or if it has merely transformed into something different, something perhaps more subtle, yet potentially equally profound and strategically brilliant in the long run.